I'm Carla Triska Carlson, and my husband is Eric Carlson. He is Lee Carlson's son, and we started coming to the Lee Carlson Center about a year ago because of my son.
I'm crystallized. I live in Fridley, and I have 3 beautiful children, AJ, Sierra, and Leo. I've been coming to Lee Carlson Center since I was a kid. I was in foster care when I first started. Now, as an adult, I love going. I love the therapists, and my kids now go, and which is great.
We definitely noticed with our son that he had some anxiety above and beyond, where a kid should be at his age. And we had been, doing everything we could in the home. And at some point it became kind of apparent to us that he needed a little bit of outside help. And when we talked about where he should go, at first we talked to the school and just kind of helping out in school a little bit. But then we thought we should definitely get him seeing somebody that he could talk to and feel comfortable with. Because of the connection with the Lee Carlson Center, we called there first, and we asked for somebody who they thought would be a good fit for him, and they had us talk to Brad on the phone. And we talked to him, kind of did like a very informal interview with him on the phone, and immediately I just knew that he would be a great fit.
I'm Brad Branham. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist at Lee Carlson Center. It's a great opportunity to really work with kids and see them kind of early on and be able to work with them through some of the emotional management difficulties that they might be having, and give an early opportunity to assist in those types of things, whether they be behavioral intervention or helping them even to discuss emotions and what emotions are and how they might be affecting them, to kind of help so that later on in life things aren't as difficult or as daunting for them. And it also provides a really good foundation for them to learn and grow from.
Well, with AJ, I noticed a lot of, like I said, me. He was a mini me, and a lot of the back talking just got to a certain point. And I also noticed he was not focusing in school. His grades were dropping, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I was like, I don't want him to fail in life. I want him to succeed.
He's always had a lot of fears, and many of the usual childhood fears, the dark, monsters, zombies. Unfortunately, all of that still exists into a later age, beyond what I think, or what we now know, is within a normal area for a boy his age. And he just tends to get really wound up, really anxious, like anybody who has an anxiety issue. He has a harder time expressing himself. He trips over his words. He gets very agitated. And once he starts school, and had homework of any kind, it just is really hard for him to complete.
When he would bring his homework home, I noticed that he didn't understand it, and he just would fidget and was all over the place. That's when I got to the point where I'm like, okay, this kid needs to be tested. But then when I talked with the school, they're like, oh, we'll do this testing, but we can't do anything else. if we kind of feel that maybe he might have some ADHD going on. I'm like, okay, that's fine, but why don't you do testing? No, we don't do that. You need a doctor to do that, or someone who can do that.
I'm Nan McDonald, and my licensure is I'm a licensed psychologist through the Board of Psychology, and I also have my licensed school psychologist degree, and I'm a nationally certified school psych. I've been at Lee Carlson Center for coming up on 10 years this summer. Psychological testing includes a battery of instruments that are tests that are nationally standardized. They're technically reliable and valid, and they're normed for different age groups and often gender. So we want to be sure that when we're doing psychological testing, we're wanting to compare that person to the norms and find out what, if anything, is going on outside those norms.
So at that point, me being familiar with Lee Carlson Center, automatically I called, Lee Carlson Center and said, I need to get him in. And they got him in within a week, which was great. I was expecting 4 or 5 months out, and it was 1 week. So that was kind of nice. We got our results back within 3 weeks of him having tested. And I took that information to the school, and because I did that, it opened up so many doors for this kid. So many doors. He ended up with, an IEP, individual education plan. He ended up getting speech help. He ended up getting a Big Brother through the Big Brother, Big Sister program. I mean, the doors just opened up wide for him.
He has a hard time doing anything independently. He is great when there's a house full of people. And he knows that every room has somebody in it, then he can travel freely. But if there's an empty room, he won't go in it. He can't go to the bathroom by himself because he's scared to walk down the hall, and he's scared of the dark room, and so he just has a hard time doing things independently. And so we've known for a while, just because he has such a hard time being on his own. And I think a lot of it came to light when his little sister was born, and she can do it all, and he can't. And he started noticing it, and we definitely started noticing it. He's always been kind of an anxious kid, It's always been there. As far as when exactly we knew, it's hard to say. In hindsight, it's always been there, but I don't know when I knew for sure. But we knew for a long time that we probably would have to get him some kind of outside help.
If parents have a gut feeling that there's something going on with their child, then they should have it looked into, and maybe, start with even the medical piece, go to their primary care doctor or their pediatrician and discuss it with them. And then we can see we get referrals through doctors as well, many, that they start with the medical, rule that out. If it's not medical, then let's see if it's more along the lines of mental health. And so I would say if you've got that gut feeling as a parent that there's something going on, follow up with that.
I'm Diana Hoffman. I'm a senior social worker with Anoka County Children's Mental Health. My primary focus, what I do is intervention and prevention with children and families. I work a lot with family systems. I've been at the county for almost 15 years. I do typically tell parents to inherently trust your gut. I think parents know when there's an issue, but I think that a lot of times we have stigma around mental health issues. So I think that they just say, well, no, it's just a phase. No, Johnny's bouncing off the walls, and the school is saying, I guess if you talk about, logistically, if he or she is doing poorly in more than one setting, and, if he's in ECFE and he's doing poorly and he's in timeout and they're talking about him being aggressive. If you're talking about a teenager and the child all of a sudden starts to retreat, and it depends on the developmental age, but again, the biggest piece is, as a parent, educate yourself, ask questions, don't be afraid that it might be a mental health issue. I mean, there is so much stigma. I have a client right now that said, well, I really think she needs to go to therapy, but we don't want the rest of the family to know. And I said, you know, you're already making this a bad thing. Of course she wants to hide it.
For a kid who's anxious, it's got to feel like you're not expecting anything. You can't have this kind of almost, you know, I don't know the word, but like if it's too businessy, it's hard for a kid who's anxious because it feels like you're expected to do something, or you have to fill this out, or you have to pass some test. There it's more like, you know, hey, welcome, play with some Legos, and then we'll kind of take you back and chat. And that's, I mean, Brad's office is like a play area. I mean, he's just got so many toys.
Play therapy can be something as simple as playing a board game. However, oftentimes it's more in depth either by doing directive or non-directive play with the child. Sometimes this can be by playing in a sand tray. Other times this could be playing in a dollhouse and just allowing the child to present different themes that are going on in their life. Sometimes we see things that have actually happened in their life played out in a dollhouse. And as a kid, it's often difficult for them to just sit down and do talk therapy with a therapist. A 5-year-old or a 4-year-old can't really just sit in the chair and discuss thoughts and things as easy as us adults can. So oftentimes kids will discuss their difficulties or struggles through play and present them in their own language.
My son just sits on the floor and plays with toys, and he doesn't even feel like it's any kind of therapy. He goes to play with Brad.
For play therapy, the whole concept of it is a child joining with a therapist, which in a normal setting, a talk therapy setting, is pretty scary. But you get to join with them, you get to build a relationship with them by doing sand time, playing on the floor with them, meeting them where they're at. It works so well with kids that are on the autism spectrum, kids that are nonverbal. There's a ton of kids that are nonverbal that do really well and learn how to open up. And there are some agencies that do excellent play therapy in regards to almost taking it on as a challenge to get these nonverbal kids to get some response. And it creates a non-anxiety provoking scenario for these kids. They're going in to play with some big adult, and it's fun. And then ultimately they end up talking about the trauma or the anxiety that they feel. I've seen great strides made in kids with play therapy.
He's a really bright kid. He just needs that little extra help. And I feel really fortunate to be able to give that to him, you know?
Everyone has friends. There's online friends, friends to go out with on a Saturday night, friends to hang out with and do nothing, friends who show up on moving day. And then there are the friends who'll be there if someone is dealing with a mental illness. Are you one of those friends?
If you drive buzzed, it could cost you around $10,000. You'll face major legal fees, major fines, and steep insurance penalties. You could lose everything. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving.
I'm Melissa Bollinger-Kinney. I have a Master's of Science in Education. I did my internship at Lee Carlson Center in 1994. Lee hired me to come in and work in the schools and do groups and also do clinical work in the clinic. And I've been practicing ever since at Lee Carlson Center.
My oldest, AJ, he sees Melissa, and Melissa is one of a kind. She actually used to be my therapist, so which is why I chose her to be AJ's, because AJ is basically me. he's a mini me. So I knew if I could handle Melissa and Melissa can handle me, she would be able to put AJ in check. And that's exactly what happened. Since AJ's been seeing her, he's just been turned around for the better. He's more mature, more grown up, less mouthy.
It's getting to that point now where I've been working so long that some of my early teens that I worked with back in the 90s now have children and are bringing their children in to see me to work with things like ADHD and issues the kids are having in school or depression, and what better place than to bring it to the clinician that helped you get your life together. And it always feels good when I have people come back and have valued their therapy with me to the point where they bring their own child in to see me. And I've got several cases like that.
Melissa helps us work on issues right then and there. She don't dwell on the past issues. She works on the current issues, which is nice because then we can move forward and not move backwards.
Well, I think it's important for them to receive early diagnosis and treatment primarily. I mean, with families that I work with, I almost likened it to diabetes because mental illness isn't going to go away, and if you leave it untreated, it's only going to get worse. If you have a child that you think that there are significant issues, you need to get some sort of an early diagnosis for so many reasons. One is, if you have a child that's 3, 4, and 5, that's really young. I've seen some kids that the parents wait and go, I thought there was something wrong when they were 3 and 4 and 5, and then when they got to 4th grade, they're holy terror, or in 5th grade, they're socially anxious, and they just don't. They don't go to school. I mean, the problems just get bigger and bigger. So if you get an early diagnosis, which in some agencies is difficult to do, some people won't work with younger kids, but if you get an early diagnosis with kids, it sets a clearer path for them, obviously a better outcome for them in the long run, to be what we want from all of our kids, to be productive adults.
I do this because I love it, and I believe in this mission, and I see what I do. I see what me being in these kids' lives at an early age does for their life and for the hope of their future. And I wake up every day going to work knowing that I'm making a little difference here and there every single day. And that's why I'm here 20 years later.
It provides an opportunity to really help those that are struggling to find a voice, be able to find a voice and work with people that they're working with in their life. Oftentimes kids have a difficult time expressing or being able to kind of manage their thoughts and their feelings, and doing it in a way that's either socially appropriate or age appropriate or even appropriate for themselves. And so being able to help them and guide them in those types of things and learn new things for themselves, as well as help others and adults and people in their life be able to learn how to work with these kids and see them grow and be able to implement some of these things, whether they be small changes or large changes over a short period of time or a long period of time, is about as fulfilling as anything else in life.
When you have kids that have severe social anxiety, they don't want to go to school, some parents will say, you're just being oppositional. But it's really internal. I mean, mental illness, we don't have a stamp that says we are. If you're developmentally disabled, people can visually see it. I mean, if you have a physical disability, people can see it. You don't see mental illness. I mean, there's not a number that we put on our hand. It just isn't. So I think as a parent, you have to trust your gut instinctively and ask the right questions, whether you start with a pediatrician and a general practitioner, or just ask your friends, or ask teachers.
I'm Kathy Samilo, and I have been with Lee Carlson Center since 1994. I started there as a clinician, as a child psychologist, and became the executive director in 2005. Youth intervention programs work, early intervention programs work. If you can even teach children and work with parents early on in early childhood programs, that's huge. If you can get the children to deal with the little quirks that each of the kids, what their children are dealing with, teaching them how to cope and teach their child appropriate coping strategies, that's huge. As far as preventing major problems later on. And kids who have appropriate coping strategies aren't as inclined to get involved in criminal behaviors or teen pregnancies. If they're interested in or drugs or alcohol, if they're interested in the right types of activities that kids should be interested in, they're not going to be as tempted to get involved in those other high-risk behaviors.
It's all about collaboration. It's all about educating parents how to best provide for their kids. It's about us as a community coming together to support these families, to educate them to understand what this is. I mean, I have friends of mine that are professionals that have children that, you know, had significant social anxiety issues and had no idea where to go. And we're talking, you know, PhD level people that don't have any idea what to do when a child starts to have mental health issues.
Traditional light bulbs actually generate 9 times more heat than light. Switch to Energy Star light bulbs, and you'll realize just how much cash you are really burning through. Saving energy saves you money. Learn more at EnergySavers.gov.
It can be a little awkward when your friend tells you he's been diagnosed with a mental illness. But what's even more awkward is, if you're not there for him, he's less likely to recover.
I'm here to help, man, whatever it takes.
Some people believe that what one person doesn't take care of in their lifespan, it will sometimes affect those that come after them. And so when adults don't deal with things that have been difficult for them, sometimes kids are sponges, oftentimes kids are sponges, and they're able to pick up on those things that are difficult for mom or dad, and will soak them in, and often will present themselves sometimes with difficulties. So sometimes we do see mental health difficulties from parents going down the line.
I have anxiety, and I've been diagnosed with panic attacks and anxiety, and I didn't know almost my entire life that I had that. It wasn't until, maybe 10 years ago that I was actually properly diagnosed. And and I do remember some of that stuff from my own childhood. And of course, in my childhood, you didn't talk about those things. If something like that was expressed, it was like, oh, yeah, you're fine, just go play. And therefore it took 30 years for me to get the help I needed. And I knew that I didn't want him to have the same issues. I wanted him to know that it was okay to feel the way he was feeling, and that he could get help, and that I wanted him to learn the language so he could express himself and tell people how he's feeling. And I feel like that's such a huge tool that he's been given by Brad, like to be able to say, I feel this way, and that somebody validates it. Because I feel like, as in my generation, me growing up, it was like you weren't validated that way as a child. And I'm not saying that, you know, I had evil parents or it was the wrong thing to do. It was just what you did then. But I want him to have more opportunities. And I think being able to tell an adult that, you know, I'm feeling anxious and this is why, will bring him farther and help him down the road.
Generationally, sometimes even when a kid comes in to see me, it can be helpful for parents to kind of recognize, even within themselves, things that they can work on, or maybe some things that they might need to work on, or that are currently working on, and oh my gosh, I can see that in my son, or I can see that in my daughter. How can I help them? And in turn, how can I help myself?
Well, I think it's really important for adults to get mental health services as well, for the simple reason that, one, they can cope better. I mean, they will react to stressors in a much more healthy manner. Instead of going home and pouring themselves a drink, they may go out and do some exercise, something that's much more healthy. The other thing is that adults will get help for their issues. They have a much stronger influence upon their children on healthy ways to act and healthy ways to behave when you're under stress or you're having just an awful day or whatever is going on in your life.
I want him to know that we understand and that we will help. And I think that's the sort of changing face of the mental health issues in this country. I think it's important to talk about. I think knowing that there's other people who have the same thing, and that it's okay to talk to somebody when you're feeling that way, and keep that open communication with your parents and your therapist if you have one, and not feel like it's embarrassing or not okay to feel scared.